The Pacific Coast Ranges are the series of mountain ranges that stretch along the west coast of North America from Alaska south to northern and central Mexico. The Pacific Coast Ranges are part of the North American Cordillera, which includes the Rocky Mountains, Columbia Mountains, Interior Mountains, the Interior Plateau, Sierra Nevada Mountains, the Great Basin mountain ranges, and other ranges and various plateaus and basins. The Pacific Coast Ranges designation, however, only applies to the western system of the Western Cordillera, which comprises the Saint Elias Mountains, Coast Mountains, Insular Mountains, Olympic Mountains, Cascade Range, Oregon Coast Range, California Coast Ranges, Transverse Ranges, Peninsular Ranges, and the Sierra Madre Occidental. Other uses. The term Coast Range is used by the United States Geological Survey to refer only to the ranges south from the Strait of Juan de Fuca in Washington, to the California-Mexico border, and only the ranges west of Puget Sound, the Willamette Valley, the Sacramento and San Joaquin Valleys or California Central Valley, and the Mojave and Sonoran Deserts, i.e. the Pacific Border Province. The same term is used informally in Canada to refer to the coast mountains and adjoining inland ranges such as the Hazelton Mountains, and sometimes also the Saint Elias Mountains. Geography. The character of the ranges varies considerably, from the record-setting tidewater glaciers in the ranges of Alaska, to the rugged central and southern California ranges, the Transverse Ranges and Peninsular Ranges. In the chaparral and woodlands ecoregion with oak woodland, chaparral shrub forest, a coastal sage scrub covering them, the coastline is often dropping steeply into the sea with photogenic views. Along the British Columbia and Alaska coast, the mountains intermix with the sea in a complex maze of fjords with thousands of islands. Off the southern California coast, the Channel Islands archipelago of the Santa Monica Mountains extends for 160 miles. There are coastal plains at the mouths of rivers that have punched through the mountains, spreading sediments, most notably at the Copper River in Alaska, the Fraser River in British Columbia, and the Columbia River between Washington and Oregon. In California, the Sacramento and San Joaquin Rivers, San Francisco Bay, the Santa Clara Rivers, Oxnard Plain, the Los Angeles, San Gabriel, and Santa Ana Rivers, Los Angeles Basin, a coastal sediment-filled plain between the Peninsular and Transverse Ranges with sediment in the basin, up to 6 miles deep, and the San Diego River's Mission Bay. For the vicinity of San Francisco Bay north, it is common in winter for cool, unstable air masses from the Gulf of Alaska to make landfall in one of the coast ranges, resulting in heavy precipitation, both as rain and snow, especially on the western slopes. The same winter weather occurs with less frequency and precipitation in southern California, with the mountains as western faces and peaks causing an eastward rain shadow that produces the arid desert regions. Omitted from the list below, but often included, is the Sierra Nevada, a major mountain range of eastern California that is separated by the Central Valley over much of its length from the California Coast Ranges and the Transverse Ranges. Geology. On the west coast of North America, the Coast Ranges and the coastal plain form the margin. Most of the land is made of terrains that have been accreted onto the margin. In the north, the Insular Belt is an accreted terrain, forming the margin. This belt extends from the Wrangell terrain in Alaska to the Chilliwack Group of Canada. A rupture in Rodinia 750 million years ago formed a passive margin in the eastern Pacific Northwest. The breakup of Pangaea 200 million years ago began the westward movement of the North American plate, creating an active margin on the western continent. As the continent drifted west, terrains were accreted onto the west coast. The timing of the accretion of the Insular Belt is uncertain, although the closure did not occur until at least 115 million years ago. Other Mesozoic terrains that accreted onto the continent include the Klamath Mountains, the Sierra Nevada, and the Guerrero superterrane of western Mexico. 80 to 90 million years ago, the subducting Farallon Plate split and formed the Cooler Plate to the north. This formed an area in what is now northern California, where the plates converged, forming a melange. North of this was the Columbia embayment, where the continental margin was east of the surrounding areas. Many of the major batholiths date from the late Cretaceous, as the Laramide orogeny ended around 48 million years ago. The accretion of the Silesia terrane began in the Pacific Northwest. This began the volcanic activity in the Cascadia subduction zone, forming the modern Cascade Range, and lasted into the Miocene. Events here may relate to the ignimbrite flare-up of the southern basin and range, as extension in the basin and range province slowed by a change in North American plate movement circa 7 to 8 million years ago. Rifting began on the Gulf of California. Although many of the ranges share a common geologic history, the Pacific Coast Ranges province is not defined by geology, but rather by geography. Many of the various ranges are composed of distinct forms of rock from many different periods of geological time, from the Precambrian in parts of the Little San Bernardino Mountains to 10,000-year-old rock in the Cascade Range. For one example, the Peninsular Ranges, composed of Mesozoic batholithic rock, are geologically extremely different from the San Bernardino Mountains, composed of a mix of Precambrian metamorphic rock and Cenozoic sedimentary rock. However, both are considered part of the Pacific Coast Ranges due to the proximity and similar economic and social impact on surrounding communities. Major ranges. These are the members of the Pacific Coast Ranges, from north to south: Pekini Mountains, southern Alaska; Chugach Mountains, southern Alaska; Talkeetna Mountains, southern Alaska; Yukon Ranges, Alaska; Yukon-Wrangell Mountains, southern Alaska; Saint Elias Mountains, southern Alaska; southwestern Yukon; far northwestern British Columbia; Alsek Ranges, Fairweather Range; Takshanuk Mountains, Haines, Alaska area, between Chilkat and Chilkoot watersheds; Coast Mountains, Boundary Ranges, southeastern Alaska; northwestern British Columbia; Chahar Range, Chechidla Range; Chutine Icefield; Adam Mountains, Ashington Range; Burniston Range; Desertish Range; Florence Range; Halleck Range; Juneau Icefield; Kakuhan Range; Lincoln Mountains; Longview Range; Peabody Mountains; Russo Range; Seward Mountains; Snowslide Range; Spectrum Range; Stikine Ice Cap; Kitimat Ranges, BC North Coast; Pacific Ranges, BC South and AMP Central Coast; Rainbow Range; Northwest Chilcotin, also classifiable as part of the Interior Plateau; Pantheon Range, Homathco area; Niut Range, Homathco area; Waddington Range, Homathco area; Whitemantle Range, Homathco area; Bender Range; Garibaldi Ranges, Clendening Range; Tantalus Range, Chilcotin Ranges; Dixon Range, Chulaps Range; Camel's Foot Range; Lilloy Ranges; Cantilever Range; Carouche Range; Douglas Ranges; Front Ranges; Insular Mountains, British Columbia; Vancouver Island Ranges, British Columbia; Queen Charlotte Mountains, British Columbia; Olympic Mountains, Washington; Cascade Range, British Columbia, Washington, Oregon and California; Oregon Coast Range, Oregon; Northern Oregon Coast Range; Central Oregon Coast Range; Southern Oregon Coast Range; Calapooya Mountains, Oregon; Klamath-Siskiyou, Oregon, Northern California. Klamath Mountains, Oregon, Northern California. Siskiyou Mountains, Oregon, Northern California. Trinity Alps and Salmon Mountains, Northern California. Yollobole Mountains, Northern California. Northern Coast Ranges, Northern California. King Range, Northern California. Mendocino Range, Northern California. Mayacamas Mountains, Northern California. Marin Hills, Northern California. Central California Coast Ranges, Central California. Santa Cruz Mountains, Central California. Diablo Range, Central California. Gabilan Range, Central California. Santa Lucia Range, Central California. Temblor Range, Central California. Caliente Range, Central California. Transverse Ranges, Southern California. Sierra Madre Mountains, Southern California. Sierra Pelona Mountains, Southern California. San Emigdio Mountains, Southern California. San Rafael Mountains, Southern California. Santa Ynez Mountains, Southern California. Tehachapi Mountains, Southern California. Topetopa Mountains, Southern California. Santa Susana Mountains, Southern California. Simi Hills, Southern California. Santa Monica Mountains, Southern California. Chalk Hills, Southern California. San Gabriel Mountains, Southern California. San Rafael Hills, Southern California. Puente Hills, Southern California. San Bernardino Mountains, Southern California. Little San Bernardino Mountains, Southern California. Peninsular Ranges, Southern California and Mexico. Santa Ana Mountains, Southern California. Chino Hills, Southern California. San Jacinto Mountains, Southern California. Palomar Mountain Range, Southern California. Laguna Mountains, Southern California. Sierra Juarez, Northern Baja California, Mexico. Sierra San Pedro Martir, Central Baja California, Mexico. Sierra de San Borja, Central Baja California, Mexico. Sierra de San Francisco, Central Baja California, Mexico. Sierra de Guadalupe Cave Paintings, Central Baja California, Mexico. Sierra de la Giganta, Southern Baja California, Mexico. Sierra de la Laguna, Southern Baja California, Mexico. Sierra Madre Occidental, northwestern Mexico. Major ice fields. These are not named as ranges but amount to the same thing. The Pacific Coast Ranges are home to the largest temperate latitude ice fields in the world. Harding Ice Field, Sargent Ice Field, Bagley Ice Field, Kluane Ice Fields, Juneau Ice Field, Stikine Ice Cap, Harildsak Ice Field, Monarch Ice Field, Waddington Ice Field, Homathko Ice Field, Lillooet Ice Cap, Pemberton Ice Field. Only the largest ice fields are listed above. Smaller ice fields may be listed on the various range pages. Formerly unnamed ice fields are not listed.